She thought marrying a gay billionaire would solve all her problems, until she found out the truth behind the deal, and what her stepmother had done behind her back. What would you do if your entire life was a lie, and the only way out was to marry a stranger? Drop your answer in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful African folktale suspense stories every week. The small room smelled of dust and old soap. The walls were cracked, the floor always cold, and the kitchen sink leaked every night. Amaka, just 21, sat on a low wooden stool in the corner, threading small colorful beads with tired fingers. Her hands were rough. Her eyes were red. Sleep was a stranger to her. Outside, the sun was rising, but she hadn't slept. The day before, she had cleaned an office building until midnight. Before that, she sold handmade jewelry near the bus stop. And before that, she washed clothes for a rich family who always forgot to pay her on time. She never complained. She just worked. If she stopped, there would be no food. In the next room, the TV was loud. Laughter filled the small house. Her stepsister, Ella, was watching a fashion show, her feet on the old table, a bowl of popcorn beside her. She never worked. She never helped. She only painted her nails and ordered Amaka around. Their mother, Gladys, paced back and forth like a lion in a cage. Her phone rang nonstop. Her voice was sharp. Her face was full of sweat. She was scared. Every call was from the men she borrowed money from. Loan sharks. Dangerous ones. Ones that could break bones without feeling sorry. Gladys had borrowed over $80,000 for a beauty shop that failed. No customers. No money. Just debt. Now they were coming to collect. The door was always locked now. Every knock made them jump. Amaka had once found Gladys crying in the toilet, holding a knife, whispering to herself. But the next day, she wore gold earrings and blamed Amaka for everything. There was no father in the picture. He died long ago in Nigeria. Only his old photo remained, hidden behind the curtain in Amaka's room. One morning, while Amaka washed the only dress she had, Gladys stood behind her like a shadow. Everything stopped. The air became heavy. Gladys wanted something. Something big. She didn't beg. She didn't smile. She just gave a look cold and sharp like a knife. Amaka already knew. Her hands were shaking. Her throat was dry. Gladys wanted her to marry a rich man. Not for love. Not for happiness. But for money. She said if Amaka didn't do it, they would be thrown out. The lone men would come. There would be no house. No roof. No food. Just shame and pain. Amaka looked down at her hands, dirty, bruised, tired. She had never been kissed. Never been held. Never even dreamed of a wedding dress. But now, her life was being sold. The price? A marriage she did not choose. A man she did not know. And a secret she was never meant to find out. The next day, the house smelled of fried eggs and fake perfume. Amaka stood outside, washing the front steps with old soapy water. Her back hurt. Her hands were cracked. The sun was already hot. A black car stopped in front of their small gate. Shiny, long, and quiet like a sleeping snake. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She wore high heels that didn't make a sound. Her dress looked like it cost more than the house. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses, her lips red like blood. Her name was Mrs. Belinda Grant. Gladys came running, wiping her face, fixing her cheap wig. She acted like royalty. She bowed, smiled too hard, opened the gate like a servant. Amaka watched from a distance. She knew this visit was not for tea. Mrs. Belinda did not waste time. She sat in their broken chair like it was a throne and opened a silver file. Inside the file were pictures, papers, a check. She came with a proposal. Her boss, Leonard Richards, known as Leo, was looking for a wife. Not a girlfriend. Not a partner. A wife. Leo was rich. Very rich. A fashion tycoon in Atlanta, 34 years old, handsome, powerful. Women wanted him. Magazines followed him. Cameras loved him. But Belinda said he needed something more than love. He needed a wife on paper. A real one. For a show. There was a family inheritance worth billions. But his father had one condition: Leo must marry a woman, or he would lose everything. The problem? Leo was gay. Belinda said it softly, like it was a secret buried deep. Gladys did not care. She leaned forward like a snake ready to strike. Amaka was quiet. Her heart was beating hard. Marriage to a man who didn't love women? Marriage for money? What kind of life was that? She said nothing that day. But Belinda left her card. 2 days later, the loan sharks came. 3 big men with broken teeth and angry eyes kicked their front door open. They tore the sofa. Threw plates on the floor. One man pulled Gladys by her scarf. Another pointed at Amaka. Next time you bleed. That night, the house was silent. No TV. No laughter. Only fear. Gladys placed the silver file on the table again. Her eyes were full of tears. But there was no water in them. Only greed. She said this was their only chance. Amaka looked at the file. The check was real. The name was real. The pain was real. She nodded. That night they packed her things. No goodbye. No hugs. Just a small black bag, her beads, and a photo of her real mother she kept hidden under her pillow. The flight to Charlotte, North Carolina, was short. Cold air. Cold people. They arrived at a courthouse. No flowers. No cake. No smile. Leo stood near the judge. He wore a dark suit. He looked calm. Too calm. He shook her hand, not her heart. They signed papers. That was the wedding. No kisses. No promises. Only terms, no intimacy. Appear together in public. $200,000 paid immediately to clear debts. Stay married for 1 full year. Leo turned, whispered something to Belinda, and walked out. Amaka stood there, in her second-hand dress, watching her new husband disappear. She was now Mrs. Amaka Richards. But deep inside, she felt more lost than ever before. The tall building touched the sky. Its windows sparkled like stars in the sun. The walls were glass. The floors were white. The furniture looked like it belonged in a dream. This was not just a home. It was a penthouse in Midtown Atlanta, and now, it belonged to Amaka. She stepped inside slowly, like her feet did not believe the floor was real. Her eyes moved from the gold-framed art to the large balcony with views of the whole city. A chef came by every morning. A housekeeper changed her sheets. A driver waited downstairs at all hours. Everything was perfect. But Leo was not. He didn't speak much. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how she was doing. He left early every morning and came back when the moon was asleep. Sometimes he walked past her without even looking. He slept in a different room. His suit smelled like cologne and smoke. Amaka told herself it was fine. She told herself this was just part of the contract. But her heart, it didn't listen. Some nights she sat by the window, hugging her knees. She watched his empty chair at the table. She watched the clock tick and tick and tick, but the door never opened. One evening, While putting laundry in the guest room, she heard his voice through the wall. His tone was low and sharp. He said, "I need this to end." Then silence. Her heart skipped. Her hands dropped the clothes. That night, she pretended to sleep. But when Leo left the house at midnight, wearing a black coat and holding his phone tightly, she followed. The driver didn't see her slip into the back seat of a taxi. She followed Leo's car for hours, across highways, down dark streets, until it finally stopped at a glowing rooftop lounge in Houston, Texas. She waited, hiding behind a tree, her hands shaking, her eyes burning. Leo came out, smiling. Another man stepped into the light. They talked. They laughed. They stood close, too close. And then it happened. They kissed. Soft. Long. Like they had done it 1,000 times. Amaka felt the world spin. Her knees gave way. She couldn't cry. Not yet. Her tears were stuck inside her chest like a burning stone. The next morning, Leo found her standing in the kitchen. She had not slept. She had not eaten. He didn't panic. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, like a stone, and said what she already knew. The marriage meant nothing to him. It was only a contract. He was gay. He needed a wife on paper, not in his arms. The money was real. The love was not. Amaka didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just walked away, locked her room, and stayed there for days. She thought about her life. Her father. Her mother. Her childhood. Everything felt stolen. But slowly she got up. She started walking again. She visited the library. She started baking. She read books about business. She opened a secret account. She took online classes. If love would not grow here, then maybe strength could. Weeks passed. She learned how to smile again, even if it was small. Until one rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. She opened the door. Ella, her stepsister, stood there, holding a pink suitcase, chewing gum, and smiling like she owned the sky. She walked in without asking. She looked at the golden lamp, the soft couch, the giant TV, the indoor pool, and then she turned to Amaka with a sharp smirk. She came for her share of the money. The money that Amaka suffered for. The money that was paid for a fake marriage. Ella dropped her bag and kicked off her shoes. She wasn't planning to visit. She was planning to stay. The sky was gray that morning. Rain tapped softly on the windows. Amaka sat alone in the dining room, sipping warm tea. Ella had taken over the living room with loud music and endless phone calls. The doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, but it felt sharp, like a whisper carrying something dark. Amaka walked to the door and opened it. No one was there. Only a brown package on the floor, soaked at the edges. She picked it up. There was no name. No return address. Only her own name written with shaky black ink. She opened it slowly. Inside were 2 papers, a birth certificate and a folded adoption record. Her hands began to shake. The name on the birth certificate wasn't Gladys. It was someone else. Ifeoma, a Nigerian woman. A single mother. Her real mother. Amaka's heart stopped. She read the document again. It said her mother had died in Birmingham, Alabama, after a strange car accident 21 years ago. Amaka's name had been changed later. And the adoption paper, it wasn't signed by a judge. It wasn't even official. Just a hospital signature, a rushed form, and a witness name that had been crossed out in red ink. Nothing made sense. She couldn't breathe. She left Ella at the penthouse and took a bus to Birmingham. The city looked smaller now. Older. The air felt heavy. She visited the hospital listed on the form. Nothing there. No records. The nurse at the front desk didn't even recognize the file. But an old woman cleaning the waiting area overheard. She looked up with sad eyes. She walked over and whispered one name. Mama Kem. A quiet woman who used to work with Amaka's real mother. An hour later, Amaka sat inside a small apartment with faded curtains and walls covered in old photos. Mama Kem placed a warm hand on her knee and nodded slowly. Yes. She knew her mother. Yes. Her mother's name was Ifeoma. She was kind, strong, soft-spoken. She had a friend. Her name was Gladys. A woman who smiled too wide, laughed too loud, and always wanted what Ifeoma had. Jealousy was planted in her heart like a seed. It grew every year. Then came the accident. A rainy road. A fast car. A crash with no warning. Ifeoma died that night. Gladys was the only one at the scene. She took the baby, Amaka. She told everyone she was the aunt. But she was never the aunt. She was never the mother. She was the thief. She stole Amaka's life, and later sold her future for a pile of money to pay off loans. Amaka returned to Atlanta that evening with fire in her chest and questions in her mind. She packed her bags. She was ready to leave Leo. Leave the penthouse. Leave it all behind. But before she reached the door, she saw something. A man. In black. Across the street. Staring at her window. She stepped back. Her phone rang. It was Leo's assistant, the same woman who brought her to the courthouse. Her voice was cold. Sharp. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten like a villain in a movie. She just said the truth. If Amaka left before 1 year, she would lose everything. The money. The contract. The protection. And the story about her mother's death? It was no accident. It was something worse. Something hidden. Something planned. Amaka dropped the phone. She stared at her reflection in the glass window. She didn't know who she was anymore. But one thing was clear. She was not safe. Not in this house. Not in this marriage. And not in this name.
The sun rose slowly over Austin, but the sky felt heavy, as if it knew the day was not meant for joy. The streets outside the grand church of St. Andrew were filled with white flowers, silver ribbons, and hundreds of guests dressed in their finest clothes. Photographers waited near the entrance, ready to capture what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. But inside the church, the air was thick. It didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like something was about to break. Zuri woke up in her hotel room long before the sunrise. Her eyes were swollen from crying through the night. She had made her decision. She couldn't stay. She couldn't watch him marry someone else. She couldn't be a part of the lie anymore. She folded her few clothes, placed them gently in her bag, and picked up the envelope Mrs. Carmichael had left with her final payment. But the money didn't feel like a prize. It felt like chains. Heavy, cold, and cruel. At the church, guests took their seats. Soft music played in the background. Sophia stood in a room full of mirrors, dressed in white, her face painted in soft colors, but her eyes looked hard. Her hands were still red from the slap she had given her mother 2 nights ago after learning the full truth. Mrs. Carmichael stood nearby, calm as always, hiding her poison behind pearls. Sophia said nothing. She only stared at her reflection, wondering if anything in her life had ever been real. Alexander waited at the front of the church. He wore a black suit and looked perfect on the outside. But inside, his heart was a storm. The file Sophia had left on his desk still haunted him. The photo of Zuri. The records. The feeling that something he couldn't name was being kept from him. He had called her, messaged her, even gone to her hotel. She was gone. Just like that. No goodbye. No answers. The music changed. The doors opened. Sophia began walking down the aisle, slow and graceful, holding her father's arm. Guests stood and turned. Phones clicked. Cameras flashed. Alexander's eyes never left the doors. His heart kept waiting for someone else. For a face that wasn't coming. For a girl who had already left. Sophia reached him. The priest smiled. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love, of union, of forever. But Alexander heard none of it. When the vows were about to be exchanged, the priest turned to him. He was supposed to say yes. He didn't. Instead, he stepped back. The room froze. His hands dropped to his sides. His eyes looked straight ahead, then slowly turned toward the guests. He spoke clearly, loudly, like the words had been waiting too long. "I can't marry you." Gasps filled the church. Sophia stared at him, stunned. Alexander turned fully, his voice firm. "My heart belongs to someone else." Before anyone could speak, the back doors burst open. Zuri stood there, breathless, her dress wrinkled, her hair blown by the wind. She walked down the aisle, not with grace, not with pride, but with truth. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She walked straight to the front and turned to the crowd. She told them everything. About the money. About the mission. About Mrs. Carmichael's plan. About the painting. About Zara. About the lies. No one spoke. No one blinked. Mrs. Carmichael tried to stop her, but Sophia was faster. She stepped in front of her mother and slapped her across the face, a loud crack that echoed through the church. "You used me. You killed her. You ruined everything." Mrs. Carmichael touched her cheek but didn't speak. She turned and walked out of the church slowly, with no one following. Sophia looked at Alexander, then looked away. She left in silence, her shoes clicking against the stone floor. Zuri looked at Alexander. He looked back, but said nothing. Zuri didn't wait. She turned around and left before he could say a word. Later that night, at the airport, Zuri sat in a quiet corner of the waiting area, holding her bag close. Her flight to Charlotte was about to board. She watched the screen without really seeing it. She had nothing left. She had exposed the truth, yes. But she had also broken her own heart in the process. She didn't think she would ever see him again. The boarding call began. People stood, grabbed their things, and moved forward. Zuri stood too. But just before she could take a step, someone called her name. She turned. There he was. Alexander. His suit was gone. He wore a simple shirt, his hair messy, his face raw. In his hand, he held something wrapped in brown cloth. He walked to her slowly. Unwrapped the cloth. It was the painting. The one from the studio. The woman in the picture wasn't just Zara anymore. It was Zuri. Soft. Strong. Loved. He held it up without a word. Zuri's lips trembled. She looked at the painting. Then at him. Then back at the painting. He stepped closer. "I never stopped loving her, and now I can't lose you too." Zuri dropped her bag. Her hands touched the frame. Her eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, standing there in the middle of an airport with strangers passing them by, the world stopped moving. A soft wind moved through the trees of Asheville, North Carolina, carrying with it the smell of wildflowers and paint. In a small brick building at the edge of town, a sign hung quietly above the door. The Healing Room, Art for Little Hearts. Inside, the walls were covered with drawings and bright colors. Children's laughter echoed faintly through the hallway. On the far side of the room, Zuri stood in front of a canvas, gently guiding a little girl's hand as she painted the wings of a butterfly. Zuri's life had changed. The storm in Austin had passed, but the clouds had stayed in her heart for a long time. She had left everything behind, money, noise, pain, and had built something small, something real. She didn't need $10 million anymore. She just needed peace. Every morning, she opened the center, helped little girls tell their stories through art, and every evening, she walked home through quiet streets, alone, but calm. A full year had passed. And then, one morning, he walked in. The bell above the door rang, soft and sudden. Zuri looked up from the canvas. Her hands froze. There he stood. Alexander Reeves. No suit. No watch. No guards. Just a plain white shirt, dark jeans, and eyes that still carried something heavy, but different now. He looked around the room, taking in the colors, the softness, the peace. Then his eyes met hers. Zuri couldn't move. She hadn't seen him in 12 months. Not once. Not in the news. Not online. He had disappeared from the world. From his empire. From everything. And now he was here. He stepped forward slowly, holding something under his arm, wrapped in cloth. He said he never went back to the company. That he left the board, sold his shares, walked away from the billions. Everyone had questions. Everyone wanted answers. But he didn't care. He had searched for her in silence, state by state, town by town, until he found Asheville. He said he gave up his billions to find peace. And that peace was her. Zuri blinked, her heart suddenly louder than the children's voices around her. But something inside her held back. A fear. A memory. She whispered the truth. You loved her first. Alexander looked down for a moment. Then he slowly unwrapped the cloth in his hands. It was a painting. A single canvas. Two women, side by side. One was Zara. The other was Zuri. Their faces soft, eyes full of light. His hands trembled as he held it out to her. I lost her, he said, but I chose you. And in that moment, there were no more questions. No more fears. Just a quiet answer. Zuri's lips trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. She took the painting from his hands and nodded. Yes. There was no ring. No speech. Just a promise. Made with color. With memory. And with love. They stood together, surrounded by little girls painting their dreams on paper, the smell of fresh paint in the air, and a soft breeze slipping through the open window. Outside the art center, a black car sat across the street. Inside, behind tinted glass, a figure watched them. Mrs. Carmichael. Her face calm. Her hands folded in her lap. Her lips barely moved. Let's see how long it lasts. The engine hummed. The car drove away. What would you do if someone paid you $10 million to ruin a wedding? Would you take the money, or fall in love? Comment below and share your thoughts. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon because more mind-blowing stories are coming your way.